What if events went differently in Captain America's Civil War? What if Spider-Man had the Venom Symbiote? Imagine a new timeline where some of the events had unfolded different. What could this mean for Tom Holland's Peter Parker? Well, welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to the Symbiote Saga. You might have seen some of these stories play out with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, as well as Tobey Maguire's. It is now time for Peter 1 to take his turn in the Symbiote Saga storyline. Before we begin this mega event on the channel, I would like to promote the merch store. Starting right now, you can get the complete Symbiote Saga merch that is on sale right now. From this one, the Symbiote Civil War storyline, all the way to No Way Home. Get these exclusive designs this month from March before it's gone. This will only be this month, and it will be available till March 1st, all the way to the end of March. I'm also doing a Spider-Man 4 to 10 hoodies. The list goes on. If you want to be the first to get them before they're gone, right now is your chance. Promo codes will also be listed on my socials, such as Facebook, Reddit, and the Discord server, as well as Instagram. That being said, let's dive into the finale of the Symbiote Saga, the beginning of the end. Different choices result in the birth of multiple realities, and in this case, it does not change. The emergence of the Venom symbiote is caused by a miscalculation of power and ability on Wanda's part. Come, let's watch and see how it all plays out. Captain America's life flashed before his own eyes. He was currently facing Brock Rumlow, who was now Crossbones. Steve had managed to defeat him with the help of Wanda and Natasha, the Black Widow, and Sam Wilson. They had all managed to get Brock cornered. They had all said in their minds, but they were wrong. Brock Rumlow was in proximity with Steve Rogers, and he decided to get his revenge by blowing himself up with Steve Rogers. Captain America did not expect a move like that, and he was totally caught off guard, as his life flashed before his own eyes. Wanda, however, was faster than him, and when Brock Rumlow initiated the explosion, she conjured a force field that contained the explosion and saved Captain America's life, as well as the other lives and the bystanders. Not yet, Wanda said in her mind, as containing the explosion was a lot more difficult than she thought. Wanda started levitating the energy field, as she wanted to take it as far away from civilization as possible, but she only succeeded in lifting it a few stories up, as the strain was too much on her. Wanda was slipping when she saw a flash of her brother's death in her eyes. No, I could have saved him. I should have done better. I'm a failure, were the thoughts that ran through her head. Suddenly, Wanda felt this rage boil at her core, and she pulled on it as she imagined sending the explosion to a place far away. The force field containing the explosion quickly reacted and started glowing red until it was too bright to look at. Suddenly, there was a rippling sound, and the light ceased, and the force field was gone. Before Wanda passed out, she saw a black goo dripping from the sky via a dark void she must have created, and she quickly stretched her hands towards it. Wanda pulled on the rapidly declining surge of power that she had suddenly felt, and with that, the hole was closed, and everything went dark for Wanda. Steve Rogers, Black Widow, and Falcon immediately rushed to aid Wanda. Steve arrived first, and he was able to break her fall to the ground. Steve looked at her face and felt immense gratitude to her, because he knew that he would have been dead if not for Wanda. "Thank you," he muttered silently to her. Steve quickly ordered the rest of the team to move out, and within moments, they were well on their way out of Africa. Nobody paid attention to the black goo that had dripped from the hole, and it was currently stirring. A very curious Nigerian man saw what was happening, and he decided to check it out. When he went closer to the black goo, it stopped moving, and then he leaned in for a closer look, and the goo launched itself at him. The man had no time to react, and he was completely engulfed by the black goo, amidst the screams of witnesses. Wakanda citizens who were healthy outreached members who were currently watching from above, but they were also spies, and 2 of them were trained like no other soldier on Earth. They also had vibranium weapons, which were indestructible. They decided not to interfere as it was against their code and policy until the carnage began. The black goo had completely merged itself with the man, and now he was currently murdering and swallowing up people. The monster looked hideous with 2 white patches for his eyes and a large tongue, among with razor sharp like teeth. I can sense that Eddie is not here. How did I get here? The creature asked itself, as it had eliminated some of the witnesses and the remaining ran away. The creature was lucky that the first person he had merged with was at least semi-compatible. The human just lacked willpower, and it made things easier for the creature as he could do anything, but it knew it could not use the human as a host for long. Where am I? The creature asked itself out loud, and he was answered with a painful slash from the back. The Wakandan warriors had decided to interfere as there were no witnesses. The first warrior had slashed at the creature's back, and he had its full attention, which was part of the plan. The creature had wailed in pain as he advanced on his attacker. A vibranium spear projected out of its chest, and the first warrior smiled. His plan had worked. He wanted to create a distraction so that his teammate could kill the creature unnoticed and swiftly. Not so powerful now, are you? The first warrior said as he approached the creature. Those were his last steps. The creature suddenly held him and drove him through the spear that was still impaled in it. The Wakandan warrior was stunned, even as his life embedded away. What are you? He managed to ask as he choked on his own blood. We are Venom, the creature shouted as it bit off his head and removed the spear from his chest, which healed almost instantly. Venom immediately used the spear to impale the other warrior, and he heard gasps from above. Venom looked up and saw the other Wakandans outreach health workers, and he grinned. And it was a scary sight to behold. More food, Venom said. Within only a few minutes, all of the citizens were killed, and Venom was contemplating on his next line of action. When he heard police sirens, Venom immediately decided that it was not worth the risk to stay and fight, so he took off. As Venom wandered through the city, before he could enter a body of water, he spotted a newspaper, and on it, he saw the headline, "Spider-Man, a hero or a villain?" The picture was a person with a spider costume swinging through the city, and immediately Venom hissed. Venom was sure that this was the only person that he would be fully compatible with, and that he had to get to him immediately. "I'm coming for you, Peter Parker," Venom hissed as he jumped into the body of water. Everything the past few months had been a blur of uncontrolled events for Steve Rogers, and today was even worse. Today was Peggy Carter's funeral. She had died in her sleep. Captain America stared on as they went on with the funeral, and he casted his mind on what had happened to him in the Avengers in the past few days. Steve shrined as he realized that it could mean the end of the Avengers altogether. Steve remembered very closely when Agent Ross had summoned all of them and told them that because of the events of Ultron and the recent events that happened in Lagos, Nigeria, which claimed the lives of innocent civilians and also Wakandan health workers, the United Nations had decided that an independent body would be formed to take charge over the Avengers. Even though Steve had expected the government to try and take control of them, he was not shocked, because he believed that the events that took place at Lagos were not the Avengers' fault. Steve had repeated his story to the authorities several times, but they did not seem to believe him. The authorities still abjured what had happened to the malfunction of Wanda's powers. No, Wanda saved the lives of the innocent people, and also my life, Steve had told them. But they were not having it. Steve decided that he could not let the Avengers become a governmental machine as they would become mere puppets and would be blinded by mere vendetta. Rogers voted on his thoughts, and Tony Stark surprisingly disagreed. Steve Rogers' surprise was specified when Tony said it was better to have the United Nations create an organization that would monitor them, as he felt guilty for the mass deaths that happened at Sokovia, and he believed that the Avengers should take more responsibility for their actions. Rogers was not having any of it, and Ross told him that refusing to sign the Accords would mean resignation. Moments after that, Captain America had gotten news of Peggy's death, and here he was at her funeral. Steve was shocked when he discovered that Sharon Carter was Peggy's great niece, and when she delivered her eulogy, it solidified Steve's beliefs, because she stated that one should never back down from what they believed in. Steve Rogers decided there and then that he was not backing down. Tony had been on rough rides before, and he considered himself a veteran, but the current predicament he was passing through dwarfed all of the other challenges he had faced. Tony had gone to sign the Sokovia Accords along with some of the Avengers when a bomb exploded and killed the king of Wakanda. The perpetrator had been deduced to be Bucky, the Winter Soldier. Tony had laid back because he did not want to attract more heat to the Avengers, but the information he got was that Steve, Wilson, and T'Challa, the son of the late king of Wakanda, had gone to capture Bucky. Thankfully, Rhodes, the War Machine, had stopped and captured all of them. Now, Tony had heard more shocking news. Captain America had escaped with Bucky, and currently he had recruited Wanda, Hawkeye, Wilson, and someone called the Ant-Man. Tony immediately knew that he had to do something before the heat blew back on the Avengers. Tony immediately went out to seek permission from Ross to take the remaining Avengers with him to capture and bring back Tony and his allies. Tony got the permission, and he recruited Vision, War Machine, Black Widow, and T'Challa, the Black Panther. Tony still felt undermined, so he arranged traveling plans to go and recruit one more person. This would be very interesting, Tony said, as he departed. Steve Rogers knew that the other Avengers would think that he was a traitor, but they did not know what Steve knew. Steve knew that Bucky was innocent. It had all been Zemo who had planned it all along. Zemo had framed Bucky for the explosion that killed the king of Wakanda. Steve was still in the dark about Zemo's motive, but he wanted to find out badly. After Zemo had set Bucky off, which led to their prison break, Steve had tried to calm him down and got the location that Zemo was heading to next. Bucky told him that Zemo was going to activate all of the other Winter Soldiers, and Steve did not fancy the idea. Steve knew the damage that one Winter Soldier could do was enormous, and the thought of having multiple Winter Soldiers on the loose gave him chills. Captain America immediately recruited some Avengers, and they helped in breaking Wanda out of her cell. Steve had almost signed the Accords, but when he heard that Wanda was currently in captivity, he immediately changed his mind. On his team were Hawkeye, Falcon, Wanda, and Ant-Man. Steve Rogers hoped that they would be enough to withstand anything the government threw at them, because he knew that they were traitors in the public light, and Steve Rogers did not blame them. Rogers quickly said a prayer as he moved out to the airport with his crew. Peter Parker entered his house, and he was surprised at the scene before him. Almost like the original timeline, Tony Stark was seated casually at Aunt May's house. Iron Man in my house, Peter asked himself, as he could still not recover from the shock. It did not seem possible to Peter that one of the Avengers, and also his hero, was in the same space with him. Tony Stark cleared his throat to break the awkward silence, and he introduced himself, even though it was still pointless, as Peter had knew almost everything about him. Tony went on to tell Peter that he knew about his secret identity, and it shocked Peter even more. What I don't understand though is why you do the thing you do, Tony Stark asked Peter. Peter smiled and he remembered just thinking about the reason he became Spider-Man before he came home. Peter told Tony Stark exactly what he had told himself then. I understand the price of not doing the right thing, Peter said. And Tony heard the pain in his voice. Tony looked at Peter as he considered what to do. Peter was a child, and he was also a wild card. But Tony felt like he needed him on his team. Tony still felt that he had less manpower than Captain America, and that's why he needed Spider-Man on his team. Tony Stark briefly narrated to Spider-Man his ordeal, and unsurprisingly, Peter was more than eager to jump into action. Stark immediately arranged for his transport details, and within moments, Spider-Man would be on his way to combat Captain America and his team. Tony could not wait to see the look on Peter's face when he saw the new Spider-Man suit he created for him. Spider-Man landed at the airport, and he immediately went into action. They had received info that Steve Rogers would be using the Hull airport to escape via a chopper. Tony Stark's team immediately cut them off, and the fight began almost immediately. Tony Stark was marveled at Peter's powers and quick reflexes as he went up against a giant Ant-Man. Peter was now calling himself Spider-Man, and it pleased Tony that he had finally accepted the name. The fight was almost like a blur for Spider-Man, and even in the end, Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes escaped, with most of the team incapacitated. Tony was pleased with Peter's performance, and he sent him back on a plane back to Queens. Tony knew that there was something about the whole situation that seemed fishy, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. Tony decided that he would go and meet Wilson for answers, and he immediately acted upon it. Once Tony had met Wilson and promised that he was on Captain America's side, he got the full story from him, and also the destination of their chopper. They were heading towards an island to stop Zemo from waking up the other Winter Soldiers. Tony Stark got to confirm that his gut feeling was right all along. Zemo was the one responsible for the death of King T'Chaka, and he framed Bucky for it. Tony immediately set out to stop Zemo from carrying his plans, and to also aid Captain America and also Bucky. Tony did not know that Black Panther also followed him from afar. The Prince of Wakanda still had vengeance on his mind. Peter was feeling downcasted. He felt that he had failed Tony Stark, and he hoped he could make up for that. Peter was currently on his way to the airport where Tony had assigned a plane to take him back to Queens. As Peter made his way, he was immediately pulled out of his thoughts, as his spider sense went haywire. Peter quickly leaped out of the way, and thankfully so, as the place he stood before him was turned to rubble. Peter rolled away to put some distance between him and his attacker so that he could get an idea of what he looked like. Peter was scared of what he saw, a black massive monster. Peter suddenly remembered all the strange sightings of a black gooey monster that had been reported in the news. Peter had written them off, but what he saw now was too real to be written off. "So, you want to dance, big man?" Spider-Man called out to the monster, confidently, even though he was quivering inside. "We are Venom, and you, Peter Parker, will be my new host." Venom snarled as he lunged at Spider-Man. Spider-Man quickly leaped out of the way and kicked Venom's face on his way out. Venom was having none of it though, as he too had quick reflexes, even for someone with his size, and caught Peter by his ankle. "Yes, I got you now," Venom hissed as he started transferring himself from his former host to Peter. Everything suddenly went dark for Parker. Peter could see events that he had never seen before. Somebody named Eddie Brock. Events of Riot, a creature that he knew nothing about. But Peter could also see something else. He could see a goblin-like creature flying in the distance, sacrificing himself for Peter Parker. He could also see other events that had never transpired, like Spider-Man throwing a pumpkin bomb at the character. Venom was glad that he had gotten a new host, because the old one had become incompatible with him. Finally, Peter Parker is mine, Venom hissed as he laughed. The merging process was finally complete, and Peter Parker was gaining back consciousness. When Peter Parker finally awoke, he went into panic mode, but Venom calmed him down. Venom showed him all of his memories and his origin. Venom also explained to Peter Parker how he was sucked in from his universe into Peter's without any warning. Parker could see the mental images being projected into his mind, and he had empathy for Venom. Peter saw Venom and a man who he had somehow knew was Eddie saving a woman from robbers. The robbers did not stand a chance as Venom cleared all of them, and their bullets had no effects on him because he just healed them rapidly. Suddenly, it was as if there was a tear in space, and an explosion came out of the tear and wiped out everyone within the alleyway. Peter slightly noticed that one of Venom's weaknesses was fire. Peter saw how most of Venom was destroyed, along with Eddie, but some parts of him that miraculously survived crawled to the tear in space and entered it. The mental projection suddenly finished, and Peter was left with mixed emotions. After thinking about it, Peter decided that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and from what he saw, Venom was a good person. Peter saw it as an answer to his prayers, as he wanted to prove himself to Tony Stark. Parker saw it as an opportunity to redeem himself, and he had an idea on how to do it. He quickly formed into Venom and made his way into the facility where the imprisoned Avengers were held. As Spider-Man entered the facility, alarms started to blare, and they licked their lips. This would be fun, they said in an uneasy tone. Peter was on cloud 9. Him and the Venom Symbiote made a formidable team, and they cleared through the guards like they were dolls. Venom had gotten the information from Wilson after much needed persuasion, and they immediately left to go after Tony Stark. Peter hoped that he was not too late, as he arrived via one of Stark's hyperspeed planes, but what he saw shocked him. Wilson had told Peter that Zemo was the problem of the Avengers all along, and he had told Tony the same thing, but what Peter saw marveled him. Tony was currently on the floor with Captain America, standing over him. Peter also noticed that Bucky, the Winter Soldier, was missing an arm. Peter was too shocked to react until Venom brought him back to reality. Peter quickly made up his mind and leaped in beside Iron Man. Tony was startled, seeing a black monster beside him. Then Venom readied himself to showcase Peter's face. "Spider-Man," Tony said in shock. "No, it's Venom now," Peter said with a grin. Captain America was startled and he rolled backwards to examine his new threat. He and Bucky were also startled, but they quickly regained their stance and charged at Venom. Captain America quickly recognized the monster from the news reports and deduced that it was the monster that killed the Wakandan medical outreaching personnels. "You will pay for what you have done to the Avengers," Captain America said, as he threw his shield towards Venom. The shield went with enough force to knock someone out, but Venom just swiped it from the air with ease, like it was a Febreze. Bucky, who was now one-handed, charged madly at Venom with a combat knife. Venom tried to punch him, but he dodged it and struck Venom at his chest. Bucky knew that he should have struck a critical part in Venom that should have incapacitated him, but nothing happened. The gash that Bucky had created simply closed up, and Venom grinned. Venom suddenly turned around and bashed Bucky's head with Captain America's shield. Bucky slammed into a wall and did not move. Captain America used this as an opportunity, and Bucky advanced on him, but Venom was faster. Venom shot out webs from his wrists, and it engulfed Captain America, which totally incapacitated him. Spider-Man quickly removed Tony Stark from his disabled suit, and both of them looked around and surveyed the scene. Tony immediately rushed towards Bucky with a killing intent in his eyes, but Peter quickly knew something was up and he cut him off. After several moments, Peter succeeded in calming Tony down, and Stark told him everything, including how Zemo planned to put the Avengers against each other, and how Bucky murdered his parents. Revenge is never the answer, Peter told Stark, even though Venom strongly disagreed. Suddenly, they heard a gunshot and they ran out to check it out, and they discovered that Black Panther, who had been trailing them, stopped Zemo from committing suicide. Tony Stark decided that if T'Challa could forgive Zemo, then he could try and forgive Bucky. T'Challa immediately called on his ship and left for Wakanda, with Bucky and Captain America, while he left Zemo with Tony Stark and Peter. When Tony Stark and Peter arrived at the Avengers headquarters, Zemo was handed over to the authorities. Tony Stark had a long and rigorous thought, and he decided that even though he wanted the Avengers to take more responsibility for their actions, he decided that putting them under the government was not the right way to do things, and he broke them all out with a little help of Spider-Man, the newest Avenger. The name Venom sounded cheesy to Tony. He hoped that Peter would keep the name Spider-Man. Tony had been studying the symbiote, and he had not found anything wrong with it. Tony was simply amazed, and a new idea of a symbiotic suit had immediately popped into his mind. Tony had already started working on it. The symbiote was very powerful, and it could be extremely dangerous in the wrong hands, but Tony knew that Peter had the safest pair of hands in the world. But Tony had already created a contingency plan if anything had happened. Until then, I'll be watching, Tony said, as he tapped his screen, which showed Venom swinging through the city of Queens. And that is going to be the first part of What If Spider-Man Had the Venom Symbiote in Captain America's Civil War. There was a lot of things that were the same, but also at the very end, a lot of things had changed very quickly, and it was a very interesting storyline. Although Tony Stark has those contingency plans in, what do you think those could be? That being said, I hope you enjoyed the first part of the symbiote saga. We're going to be continuing with Spider-Man Homecoming and also Avengers Infinity War. It will be coming next week, so I cannot wait to showcase more fan fiction episodes. You might be seeing that I'm posting more because I have a brand new schedule that I'll be posting on Mondays as well as Fridays. It's going to be crazy, but I cannot wait to showcase more content on the channel. If you guys enjoy these videos, I would highly suggest supporting the channel with buying merch or also checking out the Patreon, because I will be doing your exclusive requests on the Patreon. So if you want your requests made and you want to skip the line, there is the opportunity to do so. I would highly recommend doing that, as well as getting the exclusive merch that will only be available for the month of March. I cannot thank you all enough for the amazing support, and make sure to follow all of the socials. With that being said, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Peace out.